So my part of this first DVD was to make the graphics and the animations, also the music, to make and to add the music, and to cut or edit the film. And then of course to weave everything together in one coherent movie, so you can sit down and enjoy the film. And the style of the animation was consciously chosen. We wanted to have something that really replicated an effect of something that is very dreamy or very kind of free-flowing in a way. And this is more of this is so much more than just presentation of information. We wanted to have a kind of an artistic feel to the entire film as well. A little bit more like a music video, actually, in one way. Maybe not a pop music video, but something that you can potentially sit down and watch without the dialogue. So you should be able to enjoy it just for the graphics, for the imagery, for the animation, and for the music as one. But then when you combine all of these things, of course, all these three elements, you come up with a very interesting and very kind of powerful way of communicating a message, which is more beyond just structured information per se. It speaks more to the right brain, and it can help to convey messages on multiple levels as well, because the same idea applies with movies like Koyaanisqatsi, for instance, where they actually have the entire movie without any spoken words, but you still can see a very powerful message in there being conveyed. So that's what we really wanted to go for here, follow along in the dialogue that Michael has in a very free-flowing way. And that's also why you see the transitions are very kind of translucent, they're more interwoven. Not in all cases, but in most cases it's not rough cuts like that. It's to present that idea of just going with the flow in a way. And this is also a film I think that where you really can sit down and watch any chapter of it, and you don't have to see the previous one or the chapter before in order to follow along in the story as it goes along. Then we have this area with excerpts from other movies. We have clips from TV series and other documentaries, of course, too. And this is a very good way for us to use to, for one, kind of go away a little bit from the main storyline, and to go off on a tangent for a little while and then come back to the main story. But that is also there for the reason or for the purpose to convey a message, obviously, a conscious message to underline something that is being said in the dialogue, or to emphasize it, or to show something similar that people might be able to relate to in another way. So you can use a clip as almost like a symbol or something that represents something powerfully. So that's why we wanted to have a few clips in there as well, and excerpts to go off on tangents and to emphasize points even more. And it's also that idea that you, in order to create an image of the world, basically, that we're trying to do, trying to understand reality, you need rather to dip into your own pool of the films that you've seen or the documentaries that you've seen, and that's what kind of helps you to create a worldview, basically. And then we have this other area with the music that was really interesting for me to do music to a 2-hour-long documentary. I haven't done music for such a long project before. And the classical things can be said about the music, of course. You need a little bit more upbeat music tunes, and then you need a little bit more atmospheric or melancholic tunes at times. And that's the same thing message there. It needs to be emphasizing the dialogue, of course, go along with that. Sometimes you need a bit more pulse in it and a little bit more upbeat to take you on that little bit of roller coaster journey. And sometimes you need just more atmospheric sounds rather than music with melodies and stuff in there. And one thing that can be said about the music, of course, is that we haven't chosen any other person's music and just bunged it in there. We have actually made the music ourselves, and I think that that's another powerful way of doing it, where you can communicate something with the music as well. So overall, what can be said about the project is that it's very rich, both in graphics but also in music, and the dialogue. To add that up or to to underline the music, and the graphics should underline the dialogue. And in some cases, the graphics or the animation might cut off to a little bit of different area, and maybe not just be contextual to the dialogue that is that Michael is speaking, but it also goes off on a tangent and shows something else. So you can kind of communicate on multiple levels at the same time. So that's really interesting. And then, of course, the thing about that it's also an art form. Film should be can be an artistic expression as well, not only to, as I said before, just convey information per se, but this is a kind of blending of all different genres. You can have it more artistic, more like an artwork really than just information. But again, when you blend all the three different things that you have there, and you bring in sound effects and music and graphics and then the dialogue, you end up with an interesting mix. Because in many cases, not all documentaries, but many documentaries are kind of, not that they're heavy, but they can be a bit cold. It's not a storytelling, or they're not warm or have a kind of an artistic expression to it, because they're just about the information per se. But since we don't have any obligations to anyone else, we're independent, we can do whatever we want to do with this. We can basically explore all the different arenas, and this was one way of doing it, and a very interesting way of doing it. And it helps to emphasize the point again that you can just put this on at any place and enjoy it for what it is, either for the information, because it's interesting and it's important information and it's empowering, but at the same time you can enjoy it as a animated, almost like a music video type thing. And another thing that is very powerful, of course, is to use this technique of communicating on multiple levels, if you will, of using graphics and imagery and even speaking on a symbolic level. It's not so much maybe that you're hiding things subtextually or anything like that, and that doesn't really occur in this movie. It's more like it's very rich in the imagery, so you can watch it several times over and you're always going to discover something new. It's just not one image that is up there that's contextual, but sometimes it's multiple frames, sometimes it's images interwoven and whatnot. But also this idea of communicating on many different levels, that's something that the big guys use at the top of the pyramid, so to speak. These boys who know how to speak to both of the brain, the hemispheres of the brain, and communicate to you on multiple levels. And it's not really their arena, so to speak. Anyone can use these tools in order to empower people instead of bringing negative messages to people. So that's one area that is very interesting to explore and can really help to emphasize the points you want to get across, but use it for a positive purpose instead of using it in a subversive manner, or try to bring in a negative or an occult or hidden message in there.
Yeah, I mean, it's very important for people to realize that what we're creating is not something that's meant to make you okay with the status quo. You know, it's not designed to make you roll over and go to sleep and say, well, okay, you know, make me feel good, you know, ruffle my feathers, you know, make me feel fuzzy and warm about what's going on. It's important to laugh. We get a lot of criticism sometimes. They go, oh, you guys are so serious, you know, you take everything so seriously, everything's so pessimistic. First of all, it's not true. And I accept and know the importance of laughter and humor, you know, and to take everything, to take certain things seriously and other things not so seriously. But at the same time, when you're presenting this kind of information, when you're like a detective on the trail of a criminal, you know, everything's not okay. It's not fun to see mutilated bodies, you know, murdered people, you know, injustices. So when we're dealing with a specific area, you know, I'm sorry, you know, you have to call spade a spade. You know, my work is very much about that. I'm not interested in whether people are going to like it or not. I don't want people to roll over and go to sleep, which is the reaction when any kind of light is turned on somebody. You have that reaction where they're going to either strike out at the person holding the light, or they're going to, you know, cover themselves over with the sheets, crawl under the blankets, try to, you know, hide away from that. And it's ultimately, I don't want people to feel okay with injustice. I don't want people to just, which is what has happened. And this is what Big Brother kind of wants us to do, is by constantly insinuating this trauma on the television, they're dumbing us down to the point where we don't even, notice it anymore. And people have even said that certain centers of the brain, pleasure centers of the brain, are now being stimulated when people are seeing, acts of horror and terror. And you see this, it's ubiquitous. The line between fiction, fictional murder, fictional crime, is blurred with what is real. I'm okay with all forms of fiction. I think if crime or violence is shown in fiction, I'm kind of okay with that. From some of the greatest shows, greatest war pictures, or, there's all different kinds of violence. There's psychic violence, there's emotional violence, so there's all sorts of violence. But what is happening with Big Brother is that they're trying to present a lot of fictional violence to us so that we become acclimatized to it, or the more, sociological term is acculturated to it, so that we don't really think of the stuff that's happening in the physical world as being that reprehensible. This is a big danger. So what also we got to deal with is, in our work, we are not interested in presenting this information so that it makes you feel okay with the injustice. We want you to be mad as hell. I do. My big thing is to be mad as hell. Not with the anger that I refer to as the red flame of anger, which is, when your silly little ego needs are not being met and you strike out like an infant. I'm talking about the blue flame of anger, which is a very different phenomenon, and it's rooted in spirituality. It's rooted in a critical understanding of the world. The very people who keep talking to you about being pessimistic and being too critical are themselves cynical. This is what we find. You find it from the people who email us, the people who get in touch. And so they're unhappy that you're critiquing, but then you find out that these people have a very cynical, whatever attitude towards reality. They are the people who really are shaken up by you being an investigator and bringing up things, like child abuse or mind control, or the machinations of secret societies and all of the above. They are actually threatened by this because they're just getting a handle on reality. And the last thing they want is for you to come and shake up their reality. But my work always insists that you don't see reality, you only have an idea of reality. And if I'm shaking up your idea of reality, you got to believe I'm okay with that, because that's what needs to happen. You have to have your own inner republic, shaken up at certain times. I've often said in my other writings, 9/11 may have shaken people up, but it did wake people up. There's a difference. And with the Alex Joneses and the people who've covered these 9/11 atrocities, and some of them have done excellent jobs, they may be able to shake the American people up or the world's people up. But see, as people are going to discover later on, once you've shaken somebody up out of their sleep, they're going to very quickly say to you, where do I go now? Do I go back into another slave pen of, say, religion or Christianity or whatever? So my work, the work we've been doing on this DVD is very much to say, okay, we're hoping that you're shaken up, and we'll even, assist in that process of shaking the hell out of you to make you mad as hell, to say, okay, tell me what's going on, But we're going to offer even more than that. The idea is that hopefully we can even, point in another direction and offer some tools for the waking up process as well as the shaking up process. Yeah, I hope that the people who are watching this, are from both categories. There are people who are seasoned. They know a bit about this. They've done some homework. They've done some research. But I'm more, in my work for the last lot of years, especially as I've gotten more well-known or whatever you want to call it, from the emails and communiques I've got, 90% of them are from people who have been into the thing a couple of weeks, into this research, into this so-called alternative view. And yeah, they're novices. They're not, fully conversant with all the stuff that we are. But there's a tremendous passion and a tremendous interest and a great desire. In fact, that's the reason why they're making communication. They're getting online and asking incredible questions. And so over a couple of years, it didn't occur to me in the beginning, but in the last couple of years, I've really noticed that, this is the group that we need to be aware of. Not so much the seasoned, what I would call the choir. Because you see, the choir tends to also become quite arrogant. I sense this in the communiques, I sense this in emails, I sense this in the feedback. That, and again, as I said, I didn't see it originally. It's taken a bit of time. But with people who think they know about this, or they've bought a few books, or they've checked out a few, things online or whatever, or there tends to be, and this is probably the case with all knowledge, even academic knowledge, there tends to be a bit of arrogance, a bit of know-it-all, a bit of, butting heads, and a lot of meaningless, sort of repartee over minutiae. And what's lacking there is the passion. With the newcomers, and remember, when I say newcomer, I don't mean just the newcomers of this month, this year. In the countdown to 2012 and beyond, you're going to have every year, possibly in hundreds of thousands of people who are absolutely new to this. So my focus has now shifted somewhat from the choir and preaching to them who think they know it all, and trying to present information, which I think we've done really successfully in this series, to present, and that doesn't mean talk down to anyone, that doesn't mean cut things up too small. What it means is to be very conscious of the fact that you have newcomers in, and they see this welter of information, they see all these scholars, some of them are very different in their approach, they cover different kinds of information. We have to be concerned about them and realize that later on they'll become the choir, but then you have yet more waves and more waves of new people. So the kinds of questions, and as I said, most importantly, the kind of passion that I've sensed from these people is what's motivated me to, to work on the DVD in this way, is to present information, for instance, about Jim Keith, mind control, to show all the levels of it, from the basic street level forms, of how people are controlled, all the way up to the mega level, government and beyond. We understand that there's something psychopathic going on with killers and with rapists and with serial killers and whatnot, and we can accept this when it's on the street level, and some psycho is dragged into court, or some mother who's massacred her children or something like that. Okay, oh, horror, shock horror, what a creature. But it's very important also to realize that further up the ladder, this same sort of psychopathy exists, and the same thing with mind control. It exists on the individual levels, and we're getting a handle on that. Some of these lone assassins and so on, people tend to believe, okay, something bizarre there. But it's very important to realize that this thing goes all the way up the scale, right to a very, very high level, which is like what we've been talking about in the DVD. I think one of the most important keys, one of the most important themes for people to get who are watching this, even if they don't, follow all the different scholars that we've been presenting, if they don't, carry on researching all of this kind of material, the most important thing for them to realize is that can they begin to at least understand that man has been mind controlled or is mind controlled. What I mean by that is, look at those old pictures from the 1950s, New York streets, gangster movies or whatever, the Alan Ladd movies or Humphrey Bogart movies. Look at the the uniform way everybody's dressed, especially males. I mean, it's cute and everything, right? But the suits, the shoes, the hats, and we look at that and we fail sometimes to see the uniformity of it all. Because we're living in a modern age, sometimes we think everybody's free, everybody's diverse, nothing could be better, we're more independent than we've ever been. But see, my point of view is are we really, or is that just an illusion? What about thinking? Yeah, you may be dressed differently, you may have more fashions out there, you may have the illusion of diversity. But when it comes to really attitudinal, really, especially when it's psychological, this is what the series is going to focus on and looks into with a great detail, is see when it comes to some of the psychological mindsets, psychological urges, psychological drives, such as submission, perhaps, how we relate to Big Daddy, perhaps. Are men and women really that different? Has anything really changed since the Middle Ages? I don't think it has. What has happened is that the inauthentic life has become more decorated. Right? We've got more perks, we've got more fashions, we've got more isms and ologies, and we've got more escapes than ever before. But man psychologically is identical to the man he was maybe even 1,000 years ago in these fundamental attitudes. So then there's advocates of the fact that television programs is the brain being programmed. And I say absolutely, I'm not against television, by the way, I must say that, because it's not the oracle, it's who's using it and what for. This is a thing I insist over again and again. How much we've learned about the world from television, from movies and from films and documentaries, there's nothing wrong with it. It's the hands that who's using it, who's manipulating those oracles. But you see, I'm very interested in this it's very important for us to realize that in my work, I don't point fingers only at some them out there on the other side of the hill, some sort of, white brotherhood, Illuminati, aliens, for instance, this kind of caper, I talk about them, but I'm much more interested in what it is in human beings that allows them to be open to this kind of slavery, for want of a word. Why do people submit to this? What's going on with that? And also then how Big Brother co-opts man's need to lean, right, and to use the handrails. It's twofold, right? The slave, see, the master and the slave has a relationship. This is what is forgotten. Both are dependent on one another. The dependency is caused, or the slave wants to be dependent, because in order to face he'd rather face the anxiety of living under a pretty punitive, tyrannical master than face the anxiety of selfhood and face the anxiety that arises from finding on the true Siddhartha road of light. He's tried it. Most human beings try this. They dabble. It's too awful. Selfhood is a weight. It's a great thing to discover your own, selfhood. So mankind tends to not want to do that. He loses his center. He loses his sovereignty, and he becomes a leaner. He leans. We're all leaning on one another. It's the old handrails thing again. You're using the handrails. Okay, then Big Brother comes in and goes, oh, now that we know that the man is weak, he has no spine, he's leaning, we'll provide more things for him to lean on. And the slave then does not want that pillar of rightness that he's leaning on to ever change. So when you hear people saying, why is it that all these hundreds of years nothing in government ever changes? It's the same old, same old, same old. Even your ordinary, every street level critic knows this. Man, it's just the same old stuff. We even have footage of different politicians, different prime ministers and presidents repeating the same speech word for word. Right? People are getting a handle on this now. There is an age of awakening, right? We've addressed that. We're talking about that there's more knowledge about how this is all set up, how there is a script being played out. But the most important thing to realize is that if man is a psychological slave, Big Brother makes use of that to continue to pull the rug from under him by the influx of trauma, you see, by constantly threatening his security so that he leans all the more. So my work is very much to say, how is man lending himself to this kind of tyranny, and what are the levels of control? And can man now, the people who are onto this a little bit, who are waking up to this, let's just examine all the ways in which a man might be remotely controlled. Just in exactly the same way that, a toy truck or a plane, is remotely controlled, a toy plane, or anything that's remotely controlled. Because here's my main point. I do not believe that we're going to see mass incarcerations, guns to the head, jackboots in the face, in that way that has been predicted. That doesn't mean that there is not tyrannical action in the world. I'm not saying that a certain coterie within the hierarchy absolutely would love to do that. But that does not work to suppress the whole of America. And you have to understand the nature of the enemy. The enemy is not interested in doing that. It's had centuries to do that. It's not a fun anymore. The fun is the remote control chess piece. Look, he does exactly what we say he should do. Push that button, watch how his head rolls around and his eyes spin. The perfect slave isn't somebody who's being constantly whipped and beaten into place, because you see there's a great danger that that person will turn on you. They want smiling depressives. They want a tyranny without tears, and they're getting it. It's based on what I just said about this masochism, sadomasochistic, codependent type of thing we have. We see it in ordinary relationships and we accept it. You have high-priced psychologists who will address it. When are we ever going to talk about the same thing happening on the mass level, on a sociological scale, that's ubiquitous throughout the world? So I am looking at a tyranny just in exactly the same way Jim Keith did. Many others have tried to. A wonderful clip from Alex Constantine and others. It is this remote control creature who, as soon as you press on, he's on, and he operates in a preset way. The perfect slave, the perfect robot, the perfect cyber creature. Eventually, he will probably inhabit a cyber purgatory, some sort of state in which you are dealing with a technocratic utopia or dystopia. That's coming. It's coming because I see that man is suppressing what is human within him, his instincts, his intuitions, his spiritual body. We're talking about self-murdered people here. And those self-murdered people who are in total absence of being and in total absence of, selfhood are going to be absolutely screaming for, these technotropic and technological utopias. That's the danger. That's the danger. Well, see, having done a lot of DVDs and coming from different conferences and having watched a lot of different teachers write books and do their DVDs, I've been kind of a little bit unhappy with the way it's done because, remember, we keep on talking about the fact that this subject matter falls under the heading of like an occult, level of research, meaning it's alternative, meaning that people have to adjust their settings. We're not talking from an academic point of view here. It's okay if academics, check out what we're doing, but we are not people who have a university degree nailed on the front of our chest and a target on the back. And that's a definition of an academic. You can't sit around waiting for academics to tell you what's going on in this world in the way that, you find the scintillating work of the, alternative researchers. And if people look at the quality of the literature and the quality of the books that's come out of that world, they would realize there's nothing bogus about it. It's fantastic, given that it's such a small community of people. The Jim Marses and the different authors, fantastic, fantastic work. So the academic has a problem where they are compromised. They're compromised creatures. They have this university degree that they've jumped through the hoops for, but they have a target on their back too, that they're going to be professionally assassinated, they're going to lose position, which has happened. Professor Thompson, I deal with in my work on the Irish origins, people who've lost their jobs because they've spoken out to speak about the facts. But when I've looked at a lot of the other material of this occult field, as good as the information is, as good as the knowledge is and the investigations, something's been lacking in the delivery. And in the alternative field or in the occult field or in the world of spirituality, mysticism, what about the right brain? There's a dearth of communication to the right brain. Then you go to the mainstream, the big blockbuster Miramax super movies, right? Look at how much right brain communication they're doing. I don't know if people have noticed this, but it's unbelievable. It's so good. And this, of course, can be found even in certain lower level, graphic escapades like television commercials and, all that kind of thing. If you look at it from an artistic point of view, it's absolutely amazing what they're doing. I mean, Leonardo would be proud kind of thing, not of the content, but the stylistics. So in all my work, I've tried in a humble way and then in a much more advanced way with, architects of control, is to start to also, instead of talking about it, start opening up a channel of communication to the right brain. And that can only be done through colors, music, rhythm, vibration, to a certain extent, numbers, numerology. So that the left brain, because I believe that our left brain circuitry is already bombarded, man. How many emails do I get going, man, this is so above my head. It's taking time to digest. I don't know where to begin, this kind of thing, What I read in that is actually not that these people are stupid or, they're really having the problems they think they're having. It's because we're maybe making a mistake. So let's take a page out of the people who are putting up this sort of, who are working with all the cinematics and maybe have very anti-human messages. What? That symbolism doesn't belong to them. They've co-opted it from the great surrealists and the great artists, the great humanitarians of the world. Albrecht Dürers, the Salvador Dali's. When you look at certain famous movies, even Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, or Dances with Wolves, or The Truman Show, you see, or The Da Vinci Code, or Matrix. When I'm looking at those movies, I'm going, oh, De Chirico, oh, Dali, oh, Magritte, even, hey, Vermeer, Rembrandt, you know what I mean? An artist going, I see where they got that, oh, I see where they got that, oh, look at that. If you even look at the stylistics, the beauty of some of these incredible movies like The Black Robe, and just so many others I could mention, the absolute exquisiteness of the way that they're made. Paris, Texas jumps to mind and so on. You'll see that these people are highly versed in art, particularly medieval art. Art that spoke to the soul of man, that dealt in the phi ratio, that dealt in the golden section, that dealt in the Vesica Pisces. This is all happening in the world of the media. Basically what I'm saying is graphics, imagery, or today more animation. Animate, right? The word anima is the soul, is the spirit. So I am very much a person who's, in fact, my entire introduction to everything that I'm doing right now was actually through symbolism and through art. In the earliest possible days, you know, there's many threads that lead you to a certain thing, but art and art history was a big part of it. So I've always tried to see this information in a visual style. And so your work with the DVD, and when I saw the work that you had done before we had met, I was going, oh, this guy's got it. You know, he's on to what we're talking about here. He's got the words, and he's got the information, he's got the data, but he is presenting it in a graphic way with animation, and he's framing it. And this speaks to me loudly because there's a whole part of our mind, you see, that can dig what this is all about. And also I want this to be the way of the future because I'm interested in other people who've got these technical skills. I want other kids and other people who've got animations. You know, I'm bumping into them all the time since we've done the DVD going, hey, we love that. You know, and I'm an animator. Great. We got to use these tools that are now being provided for us to, you know, come to this information in a right brain way as well as a left brain way. I mean, there's so much you could say on this, but it's absolutely fundamental, and that's why I believe in this particular documentary film style, because bringing the imagery and the numerology and the rhythms and the music, you know, to bear is the spiritual way of delivering this. Otherwise, you know, it's a different animal when you're just dealing with the words and the information. It's not as good, it's not as hot, in my opinion. We see, again, the trouble is that when you're making anything that's in the media, like a DVD or a film, so much of that is packaged under the heading of entertainment. And we have a Google, MySpace, you know, sort of YouTube generation now, in which people just surf all sorts of material out there. And that's great, I'm all for it. But there is a bit of a danger that people start thinking that, you know, entertain me. Give me more facts. My work is not about continually entertaining you. It's about presenting teachers to you, great thinkers, people who sacrificed, people who lost, people who were jailed, you know, thinkers, teachers of the past, so that you get up and you go and research those people on the internet, you know, and in books form. You know, you check out these incredible souls of light. These are the shining ones who cared about you and your spiritual development, even when you didn't know anything about it. We're novices. We stand on the shoulders of giants. But so even though, you know, we want to, I'm not ruling out entertainment, but this is about facts. This is about information. This is about seeing the world in a new way. And it's very important that you're not just, you know, going to the movies, where's my popcorn? You know,